Hello folks and welcome back. Today we are looking at Steve Lukather's guitar solo on It's Only My Heart by Michael Bolton from his 6th studio album released in 1989, Soul Provider. Now whenever I think of 80s production and specifically 80s pop ballad-centric production, this is the record that always comes to mind, and it features a whole host of musical talent on it, from Michael Landau, Dan Huff, John McCurry, and of course Steve Lukather on guitars. We have Roy Buchanan and Diane Warren on keyboards. We have Richard Marx on backing vocals. We have Jocelyn Brown on backing vocals, as well as literally dozens of others. So it's a record well worth checking out just from the perspective of musicality. Now, we're going to start by breaking down the harmony of the track so that we know what we're playing over. We'll go through it lick by lick, breaking down how the solo is working with the chords it's being played over, and then we will talk about how to sort of practice this. So, from a harmonic perspective, It's Only My Heart is a song of many modulations, and we're going to illustrate that now. So the chorus that occurs before the guitar solo is in the what I'll call umbrella key of C major, and although we don't hear a C chord being played, all the chords are derived from the key of C. We have F major, G major, A minor, and then we see D minor pop up at some point as well, all of which come from C major. We have the 4 chord, the 5 chord, the 6 chord, the 2 chord. But when we hit the solo, everything moves. The whole song modulates up a minor third from the key of C to the key of E flat major. And the chords that we're now hearing and what we're going to be playing over are A flat to B flat. And that's our main vamp. A flat to B flat, which is the 4 chord and the 5 chord in the key of E flat major. However, when we're reaching the end of the solo, and this will become obvious to us when we break it down lick by lick, we change key again, and we are now playing over G major and A major. Now, anytime we see 2 major chords next to each other, i.e. separated by a tone or 2 frets, there's a good chance that those chords are functioning as the 4 and the 5 chord of a particular key. So at the end of the solo, when we move into G and A, that is the 4 and the 5 chord in the key of D major, which is where the song settles after the solo. We move into the key of D major. The chorus is now going to be played in the key of D. So what does all of that mean to us from a guitar perspective? Well, of all 7 chords within a major key, we have a mode associated with each of them. So if you know the names of the 7 modes, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, imagine that each one of those is assigned in sequence to the 7 chords that are derived from any major key. i.e. if we harmonise the major scale, we have a set pattern of chord qualities that are churned out, and each mode is associated with one of those. So if we think about our order of modes, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, and we know that we're playing over the 4 and the 5 chord, it means that the 2 modes we're using predominantly are Lydian and Mixolydian. Whenever you're playing over the A flat, you're going to be playing technically A flat Lydian. Whenever we move up to the B flat, we are going to be playing B flat Mixolydian. Now you might say, well, why don't we just play E flat over everything? Because E flat major is the kind of umbrella key, which is true. But the problem is, if we think about E flat as being home, we would be trying to resolve all our phrases to E flat, but what our ear would be hearing is this movement. So if I were to play E flat over the A flat chord, it's not going to sound like home, it's going to sound like a fifth. Whereas if I play E flat over the B flat chord, Again, it's not going to sound like home, i.e. 1, the resolution. It's going to sound like a 4th. Okay, so this is one of the purposes of using modes. Okay, let's break the solo down phrase by phrase. Phrase 1 goes like this, which begins with a full tone bend at the 11th fret of the B string, taking B flat up to C. And if you have a whammy bar, we can add a little scoop into the start of that bend. And what we're going to do that we wouldn't normally is we're actually going to let the bend fall back down to its unbent pitch. Okay, before we move into our slide, which is a real Huff / Lukatherism. We have a target note, in this case the 9th fret of the B, and we're choosing a note much higher to slide to it from. Okay, it doesn't really matter where, the further away the note is, the more exaggerated the effect, but it's got a really cool sound to it, loads of attitude. We then drop to the G on the 8th fret of the B, and then finally the F on the 10th fret of the G string. Now, what we're really doing here is highlighting an important chord tone to start off with. Our first chord is A flat, and that bend at the beginning of the solo is bringing us into the major third of that chord, which is a really strong interval to open with. And then we're just kind of moving down through the scale. So we have a half step bend at the 7th fret of the G. And again, we are going to let it return to its unbent pitch. And then slide up 3 frets to the 10th fret of the G string. So again, we're really kind of highlighting chord tones. We're now playing over B flat. So we've got a kind of sus4 to major third idea, moving up to the 5th of the chord. And then we have this great little major pentatonic lick, which is derived from this shape of the B flat major pentatonic scale. And to play it slowly, we have the 12th fret of the G, followed by the 10th fret, returning to the 12th, and then this great semi-bluesy kind of bend where we are pre-bending a half step above the 12th fret, implying the note that's at the 13th, then that resolve to its unbent form, and then playing the 10th fret of the G string. So far we should have So as you guys know, every Luke solo has a tricky bit, and this is unquestionably the trickiest bit of this solo. I'd also like to point out that this is just my interpretation of it. I've seen other amazing players covering this track on YouTube and they play it differently to me. This is just how I hear it. I'll let you guys be the judge of what sounds right to you. So if I break it down slowly, this is what I hear as going on. Okay, at this point we're still playing over B flat major, so we are starting with this root flat 7 root kind of figure, which is the 8th fret of the D pulling off to the 6th. And then as we hammer back to the 8th, it is the beginning of our slide up the neck, and we're going to slide all the way up to the 17th fret of the D. And then we walk up the B flat major pentatonic scale. The shape we're looking at is this one, which is familiar because it's the same as position 1 of the minor pentatonic scale. And so we are hitting the 17th fret of the D, 15th fret of the G, and 17th fret of the G. So we get... This is where it gets interesting, because we, up to this point, have just been using our index and our ring finger. We now need to bring in the middle finger, and we are going to do this pull off between the 19th and 18th fret of the G string, ending back up on the 19th fret. This is another classic Luke move where we are alternating a major and a minor third. It's the same idea that we hear in Rosanna, to give it that, what people deem as being like the slightly outside sound. It's mixing major and minor thirds. We're doing the same thing here, which is the start of this little kind of arpeggio shape, which is the 19th fret of the G, 18th fret of the B, 15th fret of the E, and then ending up on the 18th fret of the high E string. So all together. Okay, the first part you can kind of approach in an alternate picking fashion, but you are going to probably want to do the little triad section as a rake or a sweep, if we want to call it that. Okay, now this is the bit of the solo that I would probably start by practicing first, because it's the hardest bit. It's going to take the longest to get up to speed. I wouldn't say that you have to be absolute 100% accuracy. Luke is not a shredder in the sense of like our modern shredders are, with this machine-like precision. He was very, very fast in his day, but with something like this, it's about the effect. It's just about this burst of speed, so it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. You're just trying to get the effect of this little burst of excitement, okay? Okay, now we're into our final kind of descent. Again, we're back to playing over A flat, so we start with the root, sort of embellished with the major 7th, which is 16th fret, pulling off to 15th, back to 16th. And then we have this cool kind of pre-bend centric lick where we take the 15th fret of the E, pre-bend it by a half step, and then let it return to its unbent state. And then coming down the scale, we have 18th fret, 16th fret on the B, and then another pre-bend on the 15th fret of the B string. So we get bring us to our final phrase, which is, this is where we are changing keys. This is where we move from G to A major in the progression. Which is going to sound familiar. So we have a slide up to the 15th fret of the B, and then the 15th fret of the E. And then this is obviously our root over our new chord, the G, and then we're going to bend up to the major 3rd and do our classic Luke thing of when the string is bent, we are going to grab it with our little finger 1 fret higher, and then let the bend fall back down to pitch and just add some vibrato on our final note, which is A, on the 17th fret of the E string, which is reflective of our chord. So all together, it should sound like this, slowly. Now that we've been through the solo phrase by phrase, I want to give you just a couple of pointers on how I would advise practicing this. The first is to do with bending intonation. Now this is very bending and pre-bending centric solo. So we want to make sure that the pitching and intonation of each bend is spot on, otherwise it's going to spoil the effect of it. Now, I've talked about this in other videos, but a really simple but great way of practicing this is to simply play your target note as an unbent note let's say our opening note of the solo, which is this full bend on the 11th fret of the B. What we're targeting there is really the pitch that resides at the 13th fret of the B. So I would play that, and then I would try and bend to that pitch and match the intonation by ear. Okay, you'll notice that I'm not using vibrato to start off with, because vibrato can hide any manner of sins. So I'm going to do it unbent until I get used to the tension with this particular guitar. And then when it's fairly consistent, we can start to add our vibrato in. Which brings me to point number 2, which is vibrato. Again, this is something I've talked about before, but a player's vibrato is like their thumbprint. It's very unique to them. And one of the best things that you can do in this instance is go through the solo and find examples where there is a note in isolation being held for a minute. For example, the last note of the solo, and try to take stock of how wide and how fast Luke's vibrato is, and then try and match that. Take a single note and just repeat until you feel like you are matching the kind of modulation of that vibrato. My third piece of advice is relating to the fast lick, and that would be I wouldn't work on it all at once. I would at least split it in half, if not even smaller components. So I spent a while just working on the accuracy of getting from this part of the neck to this part of the neck. Okay, that was all that I was working on for a little bit. And then I was working on the kind of mechanics of that sweeping movement for a while by itself before trying to connect them, okay? If you want to be kind of effective with your practice time, it's best to sort of like focus in on the hardest components and work those first. You don't need to play the whole solo every time you practice it. Look at the kind of micro mechanics of the more trickier passages and work those out before you start to try and put it all into context. My fourth point is tempo training. So this is a relatively simple solo with one really tricky bit in it, but I would still recommend doing this. One of the blessings of YouTube these days is that it has the speed control. So you could actually start out by practicing this at 50% or hell, even 25% if you want to, until you start to be able to get some consistency between the faster and the slower sections, or the easier and the harder sections. And then when you're ready, jump up to the next increment of 50% or 75% or whatever it is. If you have some sort of slow down software, then you'll be able to work in even smaller increments, but that is something that I would really recommend doing. And my final point is just have fun with this and remember the emotion of it. It's supposed to be a really emotive kind of solo, and when there's so much to think about in terms of intonation and bending and vibrato and this and pull-offs and speed picking and all of this stuff, we can become so focused on that we lose the feel aspect of it. So spend your time working all that so it becomes second nature, and then just have fun with it. Don't worry if you make a few mistakes. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Just get the feel of it right, get the tone of it right, and the rest of it will just come in time. Okay guys, that's it from me for today. Remember, as I'm always haranguing you guys, once you've got the solo down, try and take this forward into your own playing. Look at how the phrases relate to the chords. Make this information malleable so that this becomes your own, rather than just being an isolated solo that you can play along to. Okay? Hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed teaching it a lot, and I'm going to enjoy playing it. Have a great week, and I'll catch you guys soon.